The Isu language from Assassin's Creed Valhalla is a fictional language created for the video game, based on mostly Indo-European languages. After analyzing this language, I thought this language can be considered a proper conlang, short for constructed language, comparable to the fictional languages used in Game of Thrones, Star Trek, etc. I decided to make this video because it seemed that there is very little information on this language online. The existing videos about the language, which you may have already watched, are the 2 videos from Access the Animus, and I wasn't able to find much else. So let's talk about the grammar of the Isu language. Hi everyone, and welcome. My name is Tomis Nano, and I'm a conlanger and conworlder, which means I'm creating fictional universe and languages. And I'm also a student in linguistics. I recently graduated from the University of Tokyo, and I'm currently doing my master's degree at the same university. Also, I'm new to the Assassin's Creed franchise. I started Valhalla a couple of weeks ago, and it's the first AC game I've ever played, and I'm like 60 hours into the game, haven't even finished the main story, and I found videos about the Isu language from Access the Animus and got really interested in the language both as a linguistics student and a conlanger. So I'd like to say up front that I won't be doing a full analysis of each and every piece of text known to us. What I will be trying to do is to grasp the overall structure of this language by looking at its phonological, morphological, syntactical, and typological aspects. I'd like to also say that I won't be able to give definitions for all the technical terms that will be thrown around in this video, because if I did that, it's going to be a very long video. And I will nevertheless try to be as comprehensible and entertaining as possible, even if you aren't familiar with linguistics. That being said, let's do this. The primary source of information on the Isu language is Layla's laptop, which is accessible outside the Animus simulation. As you probably know, there are several image files of inscriptions in Isu in the Secure Share folder. Each of them are given a translation, whereas only a few of them are transliterated, namely readme.odt and letters from Morrigan and Lug the polymath. Also, the readme.odt file, which features the Saga Stone, this is the only text that ever gets pronounced in the game to my knowledge. The analysis isn't too difficult when it comes to the writing system. It's a very straightforward system operating on a mostly one phoneme by one grapheme basis. This is a full list of characters. Don't worry, you don't have to pause the video and copy this table. I linked a page in the video description. You will find a page on my website explaining the basic grammar of the Isu language, but please do keep in mind that this is a work in progress. I kind of made this video in a hurry, and there must be things that I missed or things about which I said something incorrect, so if anything comes up, it will be updated. There are just a few characters whose sound values I was unable to determine. Hopefully, more info on the language will be released in expansions and future AC games. As for the sound, as was mentioned earlier, the readme text is the only one that can be heard in-game, but there is enough information in this one to have a general understanding of the sound system. The first thing I noticed is that this sound transliterated as CH is pronounced as either voiceless velar fricative or uvular fricative. In non-technical terms, it's similar to the CH sound in, among others, German or Celtic languages. Also, the RH sound is pronounced like voiced uvular fricative or trill, similar to the German or French R. So my hypothesis is that the CH and RH sounds form a pair of voiceless and voiced consonants, just like T and D, and P and B. As far as I can tell from Layla's pronunciation, they are uvular rather than velar. Furthermore, this would make more sense typologically than supposing, say, a voiceless alveolar trill R for RH, because languages that have more than 2 liquids are statistically rare. I mean, okay, this may not be the first thing you'd be interested in, But when linguists work with transliterations rather than the International Phonetic Alphabet, they need to know the rules about which grapheme corresponds to which sound. When I first saw the transliteration from the README text, I wondered what sound the CH and RH represented. The other thing I noticed is that there are many instances of syllabic sonorant sounds. In short, syllabic means that the sound in question is allowed to form the nucleus of a syllable, while sonorant, in the context of this particular language, refers to the phonemes M, N, R, and L. In English, this is not the case. We can't have syllables like msm, which is a totally valid word in Isu. We typically need vowels for a syllable to be well formed. The reason why I believe that the author of this language consciously intended to include syllabic sonorant can be seen in the writing system. When these sonorant phonemes independently form the nucleus of the syllable, there is one extra stroke added to the side. In the transliteration of Sanskrit, for example, which I believe is one of the languages that Isu draws inspiration from, the sonorant is marked with a dot underneath. The reason why this isn't transliterated as such in the game, I don't know. Maybe the font they chose didn't have the dotted letters, or maybe it was simply deemed to be unnecessary. There are cases where this hypothesis may not hold up in regards to syllabification and overall phonology of this language, but I won't go down that rabbit hole in this video because it would get really complicated. If anything, I will talk about them on the aforementioned webpage, or possibly in future videos. Additionally, this language has a relatively large inventory of vowels. It's not crazy large, but there are 5 basic vowels I think, and there are at least 2 variants for each vowel, so it's not on the small side either. I still can't figure out which features specifically the diacritics add to the basic vowels, but I can tell that the A with the grave accent is kind of backed and low. I'm guessing the acute accent is meant to represent long vowels, as in many languages, including Irish. I believe the morphology of this language can be described as being mostly agglutinative if we were to use the traditional terms in linguistic typology. I mean, terms like agglutinative, inflectional, and isolating are kind of old, and as I understand, more appropriate alternatives are being introduced these days. But for the sake of explanation, please allow me to use these terms, since they are fairly widely known, even outside of the academia. So, agglutinative. This means that grammatical function of each word is primarily expressed by means of affixes rather than word order or declensions and conjugations. This is contrary to ancient Indo-European languages like Latin, Greek, and Sanskrit, which are commonly considered to be inflectional. But Isu is similar to Proto-Indo-European, the actual real-life ancestor of all the Indo-European languages in this respect. I think the PIE morphology is generally understood to be a combination of roots and affixes. I mean, the details of the affixation system is very different from PIE, but it does a good job of conveying the idea that Isu is the mother of all human languages. So I decided to use the term nominals instead of nouns. Why? Well, because in ancient Indo-European languages, the distinction between nouns and adjectives are not as clear-cut as in, say, modern English. This isn't to say that there is no distinction between these two in those ancient Indo-European languages, but they are generally thought to share the same declension paradigms. I can't say for certain whether the same is true in Isu, but for the moment I will assume that there is at least some sort of affinity between nouns and adjectives. By the way, declension. Nominals don't conjugate, they decline. Nominals have at least 5, possibly 6 cases, namely nominative, accusative, genitive, dative, and ablative. Also, inessive, whose existence is debatable as it's only used in a few instances, which are found in Luke's letter and the Canterbury text. You would be familiar with the first 5 cases if you've ever studied Latin, another language that was the inspiration of the Isu language. There is a distinction between singular and plural as well, but rather than having a proper set of case endings for singular and plural, this language uses the infix "r" for the plural, which comes before the case marker, like this. The singular is unmarked, meaning that you attach nothing when the noun in question is singular. Online articles written about this language seem to unanimously say that this language has verb conjugation, but personally, I think the derivational process is technically more aptly described as affixation rather than conjugation. I mean, the boundary of this distinction is kind of blurry, but in this case, I think it's very clearly affixation. Let's say at least it's beneficial to analyze it that way. So, this language has first, second, and third person, singular, and plural, but no grammatical gender as far as I can tell. These are expressed by these affixes, and these I decided to call pronominal infixes, as it comes before all other affixes that can be attached to the verb. Other affixes include tense marker, which is I for present and A for past, voice marker, which is 0 for active and hr for passive. Also, there could be the infinitive form where it's followed by the word r, not an affix, but a separate word. This r word seems to be also used as a postposition, meaning something close to to, so it could be that the infinitive form may be treated like nouns. Syntax refers to the way how the words are lined up in order to form a cohesive sentence. It's the question of which word comes before which word. Firstly, the basic word order of Isu is, I assume, SOV, meaning that the subject is followed by the object and then the verb. In fact, the verb is often the last word in each sentence, because seemingly any adverbial constituent, such as adverbs and postpositional phrases, are placed before the verb. Speaking of postpositions, I think it can be safely said that the language uses postpositions rather than prepositions. In the Access the Animus video about the language, they correctly identify the meaning of postpositions, but they call them prepositions, which is not technically correct. I mean, I don't want to be rude or anything, but just a minor detail I wanted to point out. Secondly, the adjective comes after the noun, but curiously, when a noun in genitive case modifies another noun, it comes before the noun that is modified. Thirdly, the copula is affixed to the end of the noun phrase. However, the copula construction was probably what I struggled the most to understand. I will elaborate on this topic in the future. Also, as for the word that is assumed to be the conjunction equivalent to when in the Saga Stone inscription, Access the Animus says it's kind of strange that it's placed at the end of the phrase. I don't personally think that it's that strange, as it happens in many languages, including Japanese, which is, by the way, my first language. I think the quat affix is inspired by its Indo-European counterpart, such as the Latin conjunction que, which is typically used in the exact same way as an isu, affixed at the end of the noun. Okay, that's all for now. As I said earlier, I don't think I've spent enough time analyzing this language, and there may well be many things that I say which would turn out to be incorrect. These are just my preliminary observations, so I think I will try to find those mistakes and correct them, and also try to explain things in the language that I wasn't able to at the time of the recording of this video, such as the copula construction. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please leave a like and subscribe for possible updates. Comments are also deeply appreciated, especially if you could add anything to the discussion of the language. Also, please consider supporting me on Patreon if you really enjoy this kind of content. Thank you very much.